First reading this morning comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 18, verses 1 through 10. And here we meet Father Abraham. Yahweh appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. He lifted his eyes and looked and saw that 3 men stood near him. When he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself to the earth and said, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, please don't go away from your servant. Now let a little water be fetched. Wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. I will get a piece of bread so you can refresh your hearts. After that you may go your way, now that you have come to your servant." And they said, "Very well, do as you have said." Abraham hurried to the tent to Sarah and said, "Quickly, prepare 3 seahs of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd and fetched a tender and good calf and gave it to the servant. The servant hurried to dress it. He took butter, milk, and the calf which he had dressed and set it before them. He stood by them under the tree, and they ate. They asked him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" He said, "There in the tent." And the guest said, "Certainly, I will return to you at about this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Amen. Y'all can see it. Our second reading this morning comes from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 9, beginning in verse 35 and going to chapter 10, verse 1. Jesus went about all the cities and the villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were harassed and scattered. They were like sheep without a shepherd. And he said to his disciples, "The harvest is indeed plentiful, but the laborers are few. Pray therefore that the Lord of the harvest will send out laborers into his harvest." He called to himself his 12 disciples, and he gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every sickness. Friends, this is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Let's pray together. Lord, help us to become masters of ourselves so that we might be the servants of others. Take our minds and think through them. Take our lips and speak through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire. Amen. When my daughter Kate was very, very young, I was serving a rural church in Tennessee. We lived in the parsonage, and my wife Jessica would commute back and forth every day to her work in Nashville at the United Methodist Publishing House. Kate would go to her daycare preschool 3 days a week, and so 2 days a week we got to have our daddy-daughter days. They were some of the best times. We watched Sesame Street together, we played on playgrounds, we read books. Every now and then I got her to take a nap. It was lovely. Eventually I discovered in my pastoral role, daddy-daughter days could still be work days. I could take Kate along with me to nursing homes or to visit shut-ins. As a toddler, she crawled on people's laps, and she learned where some of these folks kept their cookies in their house and just go point at the cabinet. Eventually, it was just decided she was the pastoral caregiver and I was the chauffeur, and we were fine with that. Those daddy-daughter days, especially as we're reflecting on Father's Day coming up, those are some of my best memories as a parent. Well, as I said, she went to daycare 3 days a week, and daycare is great for socialization and learning and all kinds of things. Daycares are also an absolute petri dish. Children are crawling all over each other, slobbering, all this stuff. And so kids that go to daycare, they develop and mature their immune systems a lot earlier because they catch everything at daycare. Well, this happened one daddy-daughter day. One morning he got up and she wasn't really feeling her breakfast and going, okay, something's up, her tummy's a little upset. And before Sesame Street was over, it became clear she had caught a nasty stomach bug. Some stuff was starting to happen. And by the time lunch rolled around, it became clear she'd given Daddy the nasty stomach bug. Stuff was starting to happen. I'll leave it at that. But there was a certain point at which we were both pretty miserable, and I'm on the phone to my wife going, you have to come home from work now. It wasn't fun. We laugh about it now, but in that moment, of course, I was physically feeling terribly unwell, but it was even worse for me to watch my 18-month-old daughter struggling and having these terrible sensations because she kept looking at me saying, Daddy, make it stop. Daddy, make it stop. My heart hurt worse than my stomach in that moment. Parents, you all know what this is like. In fact, I think everybody that's lived enough life knows a moment or many when we are painfully confronted with other stuff going on in the world and we just wish, we wish we could just wave our hand and make it all better. That ache as a parent and as a human being is something I often feel when I will read stories like this in the Gospels, when Jesus is able to come and seemingly touch somebody and make the bad stuff go away. And then it really hurts even more when I see him commission the disciples and saying, you can do the same thing. And in the book of Acts, we see some similar types of things. And so there's an ache in me when I read these stories because, try as I might, I've never been able to just touch somebody and make the bad stuff go away. Now, there are some brother and sister Christians and other traditions that do, in fact, believe you can do that and will do it in very public settings. Usually their curing touch comes with the condition of you sending a check to their ministry. Not always. But for most of us, our experience of the world stands a little bit at odds with at least one way to read stories like this. We can't just touch something or wave a magic wand or write a check or sign an online petition and just instantly make the bad stuff go away. And so there's a little bit of us that aches when we read stories like this. I gotta be honest, when I look at the world around me, I'm feeling a similar ache right now because I don't think this is a controversial statement. We look around us and the world is sick. And I want to wave my hand and make the bad stuff go away. I want to go lay hands on every COVID-19 patient and make that virus go away. I want to shout at the tomb and make the over 100,000 of our fellow citizens rise from this disease. The world is sick. I want to go lay my hands on the doorposts of homes in underprivileged areas in Louisville where I live and just magically increase their opportunities. I want to be able to write a check and just give them all the advantages that I have had growing up in a privileged life. I want to do that because I see that the world is sick. I want to go lay my hands on the doorsteps of every single police department. Because we have a system that is broken and sick. Even though most police are really good people who are there to serve, there is something so deeply broken about our system of law enforcement that a black person is exponentially more times likely to experience police violence than I, as a Caucasian person, am. I can't fully articulate what all of that is. But we see that our world is sick. And anyone with an ounce of compassion is going to have a little bit of ache and want to just wave a hand and make those bad things go away. And like I said, it's difficult to know what to make of stories like this because I believe Jesus. I take Jesus at his word, but my experience of the world doesn't allow me to believe I can really just instantaneously cure the sickness. So sometimes I'll read stories like this and feel a little lost. But then I remember, this isn't the only way to read the story. The waving of the hand and the instantaneous cure that certainly happens in the Gospels and whatnot. Because after all, when we look at what Jesus is saying here, and this is true across multiple English translations, Jesus doesn't tell the disciples that they go cure everything. He says heal. He's not just telling them to cure, although there's curing that happens. He tells them that you go and you heal. Healing is a lot bigger than a physical cure to a problem. I can't tell you how many people in churches over the years that I've known who, upon being diagnosed with a terminal disease, a condition where they say, you've got X amount of time, these folks have taken a step back and they have reevaluated their priorities in life. They've taken the time to tend to broken relationships. They've received reconciliation, and so when most of them ultimately succumbed to that condition, but they did so surrounded by family and friends, some of whom they weren't speaking to when this diagnosis came down. Like I said, they almost always lost that physical battle with the terminal illness, and yet that time in between, they were able to achieve a deep healing in life that was far more substantial than a physical cure. That time in between led them to do some things and to repair some relationships that would not have just been fixed by a quick "I'm sorry" text or card. Led them to reflect deeply on their life, to express true repentance for the things that had made those relationships broken. And friends, that is healing too. In fact, that's a healing that's maybe even a little bigger than a cure. And so these many sicknesses in our world, well, some of them came on suddenly. In this global pandemic, we just found out what COVID-19 was a couple months ago, and we knew it was overseas, and all of a sudden my kid's school shut down for the rest of the year, and I'm working from home. That was fast. Some of the sicknesses in our world have been around a long time. Some of us have had the privilege of living in a safe space and ignoring them. The sicknesses of racial and economic inequality that have been around for a very, very long time, centuries. And frankly, none of these deep sicknesses of the world will be cured right away. Maybe there will be COVID-19 vaccine tomorrow. Probably not. It'll be a while. And we're certainly not going to achieve economic equality among all people or racial reconciliation tomorrow. A cure won't be quick. But we're still compelled to ask, as followers of Jesus, how do we participate in God's healing of this very, very sick world? I think one possible way that we do that we can all do, is found in the first story we read with the example of Abraham. At this point in Abraham's journey, he has been leading this nomadic life for a very long time. Out in a very arid, harsh part of the ancient Near East, it's a hard-scrabble existence. Survival is a daily chore. And so when he sees these strangers on the horizon, He doesn't know who they are. He doesn't know where they're friendly. He probably doesn't know that they're divine beings. Genesis truncates the narrative a little bit, I think, for the sake of convenience, but for the most part, Abraham probably doesn't fully know who's there. And yet, he runs toward them. He puts the best of what he has before them, no questions asked. In fact, the Middle East is still like that today. Hospitality is a core value. If you are in somebody's home, even if it's a pretty run-down looking home, they will put the best that they have in front of you. They'll treat you to a feast, and part of you is almost embarrassed to take when you see the ways folks live and the villages they're in. And yet to not receive their hospitality would be an insult to them. Middle East is that way today, and it was that way in Abraham's time. Hospitality was, in fact, an essential value. Because in Abraham's time, people could be traveling through this arid landscape for days and days without finding sources of food or water. And if you see these people pass by your tent and you ignore them, you don't know how long they've been out without food and water. You don't know when they're going to find it next. To not offer hospitality could functionally be sentencing someone to death. And it would be a great shame were you not to run out to somebody and say, hey, you've been traveling all day in the hot sun. Let me get you some water. Let me get you some food. Take off your shoes. Rest. I'm going to do this for you because I know if I'd been traveling 3 days through the desert, I would want someone to do this for me. I wouldn't want to have to go up and ask. I wouldn't want to have to wait for the invitation to come in. That's what I want someone to do for me. Someone to do that for you. For them, hospitality is not just a nice idea or a bonus. It's a matter of honor. And we know it's through this gracious act of intentional hospitality that Abraham finally encounters the guarantee of that promise that God had given him so many years ago. At this point, Abraham's right around 100 years old. And he's receiving again this promise that he will have a son, that he will have ancestors, that his name will live on, that he has a future. He thought that ship had sailed a long time ago. He thought his best days were behind him, and yet here he is again receiving this promise. Yes, you do have a future. Yes, you do have hope. Yes, the best days are ahead of you. Even if the circumstances may not totally make sense right now, it's going to happen. I don't believe this one act of hospitality is what got Abraham the promise. I believe his many years walking in faith and believing in God's promise led him to this gracious act of hospitality. And because he'd been walking in that way, he was able to see when that moment of promise was able to arrive. Really, the challenge is the same for us. As people who have received so much, who luxuriate in the grace of Jesus Christ every day, whether we realize it or not, who have been very fortunate in comparison to many in the world, I think it's incumbent upon us not to just kind of be nice to somebody if they come by. Not just, wait around. I guess you can come in if you want. That's the easy stuff. It's easy to be nice to somebody when they go ahead and take the time to darken the door of the church. What if we didn't wait around for that? What if practicing active, intentional, maybe even aggressive sometimes, hospitality in our own time, what if that is one way that God is calling us to be part of healing the deep sickness in our world? It's not an instant cure, but it is an act of healing nonetheless. Again, Abraham didn't wait for the strangers to come to him. He ran up. He offered his best, not just some water, a little bread, the good meat, the good butter, the good cheese, the stuff. Yum. It's easy to wait around. What if God is calling us to take the first step? What if we took the initiative to go and seek out somebody we don't know well? Maybe that neighbor we've lived next to for 10 years, but we barely even know their name. Or maybe someone we do know a little too well, and we know we don't agree on anything. I bet you all know somebody like that, don't you? I should. What if we approach that person and offer to buy them coffee? Or if we can't do it because of social distancing, let's do a half-hour Zoom chat. Just sit down. Not to debate anything, to try to convert them to our way of thinking, our way of voting, or believing, or whatever it is. Just to get to know them. To sit down and say, tell me about you. What would happen? What would happen if we did that one day? What would happen if we did that the next? We started building foundations of relationships where we knew more about that person than who they voted for, or what cable news channel they watched, or what the color of their skin was, or whether they're a Louisville fan or a Kentucky fan, or any of these other things we use to differentiate ourselves from one another. And those differences are important, but they don't annul the image of God that is within each of us. What if instead of a fan of the other team, or of the other politician, or whatever else, we saw that other person, and first and foremost saw a child of God? I can still tell them, I think the way you vote is wrong. I think your sports team stinks. What if, looking at that person, we first and foremost saw a child of God? That doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't. It takes these intentional, gracious acts of hospitality, of our reaching out first and not waiting, of our building the foundations of those relationships, and then one day we realize, I just used to see this person by the bumper sticker on their truck, and now I see them as a person. Suddenly we'll realize that healing has taken place. That we put down some of these foundational building blocks of God's healing of the deep sickness in our world. We will probably not be able to cure the sickness instantaneously by waving my hand. I wish I could. And if a voice comes from the sky telling me that and I'm able to do it and it works, I'll tell you, I promise. But for now, you and I, all of us watching online, all of us out in the world, what if this week we took one step to reach out and get to know somebody who's different than us? It would be a quick email, coffee in person if you can do it, whatever. I'm actually going to be back here in worship the next week, so I'm going to put this question up on the church's Facebook page, and I hope you all will respond. Let us know how it went. Tell us a story about how that went, and we'll come together and rejoice in those small and yet really substantial acts of healing that we were engaging in this week. Think we can do that, Bethel UMC? I think we can. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to give you, and I'll be honest next week if I was able to do it, or if I did it, and if it worked. This week, let us, as we notice and hurt and lament the deep sickness of the world, let us remember God is calling us into some pretty radical hospitality, into small but substantial acts of healing, and have the faith that God will use all of those small contributions, make them something greater than the sum of their parts, and we will indeed see healing in the sickness of the world. Amen.